Hi, it's Leslie Fightmaster. This tutorial is for Lisa Wagner, and it's a little backbend tutorial, so how to practice backbend safely. I also have a class on this channel, so a full class on backbends and different poses that lead up to backbends so that by the time you get to your backbends, your body's ready. So some things to keep in mind when you're doing backbends, you want to make sure that you've warmed up your shoulders really well. You also want to warm up this part of your leg. This is the hip flexor, the front of the thigh. And you want to make sure as well that you have some core strength and that you're working your core muscles. So one thing I want to show you about backbends is we're going to actually stand up. And if you could look down at my feet, if you could turn down toward my feet, it's very important when you're doing a backbend that the outer edges of your feet are parallel. A lot of people turn their feet out. And the reason you don't want to turn your feet out is I want you to feel this in your body. So turn your feet out and take your hands right to your low back. And then with your feet turned out, lean forward like you're going to go into a back bend. What you'll feel is some compression in your low back. Do the same thing with your feet parallel and notice the difference when you go back. What happens, it's external rotation in the thighs. When the thighs are externally rotated, it causes compression in the low back. So that's why if your feet are parallel, then you have a nice neutral rotation with the legs, and then you won't get that compression in the low back. If you're not exactly sure what I mean by that, grab a block, or you could roll up a towel or a blanket. So I have my block, and just put it right between your thighs and just give it a nice little squeeze. This is going to cause that just slight internal rotation in the legs that will be sure that as you do a back bend, you won't get that compression in the low back. So I'm going to show you Ustrasana, a little variation of Ustrasana or camel pose. So I'm going to come back down to my knees. So that's one thing, is that slight rotation. So if you have a block, you can hold it here between your thighs to give you that rotation. Another thing is that you want to kind of think about your pelvis like a wheel. As the pelvis, as you're going to go back, you want to shift your pelvis and your thighs forward. So like you were going to do the limbo. You know how you always kind of lead with that part? So as you shift your thighs forward and lean back, it's like a wheel, like this is coming forward and then I'm leaning back from there. So that's one thing also to keep in mind. You don't want to just take a back bend ever from your low back. Your low back is the bendiest part of your back. That's the part of your back that wants to do the back bend, but that's also the part of the back that, because it's so bendy, it's the least stable, and that's the part of the back that will get hurt. So that's why you need to use the hip flexors as well, by bringing the thighs and hips forward and then leaning back from there. The second part, like I said earlier, is the shoulders and this whole area around the shoulders. So this part here in my back, that's where my thoracic spine is. The thoracic spine normally goes in this direction. So this part of my spine is a little bit rounded that way. What we want to do is flatten it out. So the way to flatten it out is to bring the shoulder blades toward each other and in toward the front of your body. If you're not really sure what that feels like, take your block and you'll put it right in the middle of the back, right about where your bra strap would go across, ladies. So you put it right there, and that's the part of the back I'm talking about. We want that part to flatten out. So with Ustrasana, camel pose, when I get into this part of my body, so I've already kind of worked this wheel. This wheel is roll the shoulder heads back as I lean back, and then like there's a string attached right here, I lift my chest up toward the ceiling. So those are the components of the back bend, and they really work with any back bend that you're doing. So if you're doing bridge pose, it's the same thing. You're on your back in bridge pose, but you make sure that the outer edges of the feet are parallel. When you come up, your tailbone is reaching toward the backs of the knees. So that's the same thing as lifting and pressing the thighs up. So these parts, this hip bone and this low rib, you want to move those parts toward each other. And then with the shoulders in bridge pose, you're rolling your shoulders under, which helps to get the shoulder blades to move in toward each other and up, and helps to widen across the collarbone. Sorry, I probably just hit the microphone with my hand. And then if you're doing full wheel pose, it's all the same. Hands by the ears, come onto the crown of the head, line up your wrists right under your elbows. Watch your feet though, they really want to turn out here, so make sure they're parallel. Oh, watch your elbows too, they also want to go out. Make sure they stay parallel. Press up, reach your tailbone toward the backs of the knees, press your chest toward the wall you're looking toward. To come down, bring your chin into your chest and roll down. So that's a tutorial on back bends. One last thing to note, if you're doing back bends in a row, a lot of times we'll do like 3 bridge poses or 3 wheel poses, and we're doing several in a row because it's a good way to warm up, is to do a back bend to warm up for a deeper back bend. But the important thing, a lot of people, when they come down between back bends, they really, really want to hug their knees into their chest. You're going to feel like you want to. Don't do it unless you're all finished with your back bends. And the reason is because if you think about a paper clip, paper clip bends one way, the other way, one way, the other way. Eventually, it just breaks down, it gets weaker, and with a paper clip, it snaps in half. Now, I'm not saying your spine's going to snap in half, but that's a lot of pressure on the spine to go one way and the other way, one way and the other way. So I recommend that you do all of your back bends that you're going to do. When you're finished, then you'll take your counter pose, then you'll hug your knees in. And then like if you did camel pose, do all the camel poses you're going to do, and then take your child's pose. After you've done a little bit of a hugging the knees in or a little child's pose, then you can take your counter pose, your forward bend. So you want to kind of ease into your full counter pose as well, because that's a lot of strain on the back, and you want to make sure that your back stays very, very safe. So hope that was helpful. Please subscribe if you haven't, and tell a friend. Thank you so much for sharing the videos, and thank you very much for all of your lovely comments. I really enjoy reading them every day. And if there is a tutorial that you would like to see, just leave it below, and I will do it the next time I do tutorials. And have a wonderful day. Thanks again for your donations. They help more than you know. And namaste.